Hello everyone, my name is Yulia and I'm an expert on the Great Silk Road. And here I start the series of lectures which are going to be the part of the Silk Road chapters project. And in the first 10 lectures we're going to cover the history of the Central Asia, the last 3,000 years of its history. But our bigger goal is to talk about the art, culture, architecture and other aspects of the trading routes that once were famous at the Great Silk Road. And previously these trading routes united east and west, and of course this period of time is one of the most fascinating chapters in the book of human history. In our first lecture, we're going to talk about the geography of Central Asia. Yes, I understand that for a lot of you it sounds quite boring, but actually without understanding the local environmental condition, it's not possible to understand its history also. And it's especially true about Central Asia because here the environmental conditions are very diverse, are very different from mountains to deserts, from lakes to the rivers. And of course, we need to discuss that first of all. Central Asia lies in the heart of Asia, as its name suggests, obviously. So to the north we have Russia, to the south we have Afghanistan, Pakistan and India, to the east we have China, and to the west we have the territories of Iran. Nowadays we usually refer to them as 5 countries. It's Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. But these are only political boundaries, not geographical. So geographically we can also include into Central Asia the part of Afghanistan. Also we can include the Western China, which is Xinjiang, and we can include the Eastern Iran. Yeah, but of course, to make it more convenient, we're going to talk about these 5 countries. If in some sources you can see the reference to Central Asia as the place which includes Iran or Western China, it's not a mistake. But in that sources, they talk about geographical boundaries, not political ones. But we will talk about so-called 5 stans. Yeah, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and etc. So stan, don't get misled by that part of the name, because stan, it comes from Sanskrit and it means the place or the state. But be careful, even though Afghanistan or Pakistan, they also have stan as a part of their name, they don't belong to Central Asia. Think, for example, Rajasthan in India. Of course, it's really far away and it's not the part of Central Asia. The total area of Central Asia is around 4 million square kilometers, which makes only around 2% of the Earth's surface. There are several countries, the biggest of which is Kazakhstan, with around 2.7 million square kilometers, and Tajikistan, that makes only around 143,000 square kilometers. Over 80 million people live in this region, and the population keeps on growing due to the high birth rates. And that's how in some of the countries of this region, around 50% of population are under 18. The current national borders of Central Asia are only around 100 years old. Before 1924, the territory was called Turkestan. It was the Russian name. Earlier, the region, it was divided into several states, into several Khanates, like Khanate of Khiva, of Bukhara, and of Kakand. But all these names, they're relatively new to the millennia-long history of this region. Yes, nowadays the territory is divided according to the title ethnic group. Like in Uzbekistan, the majority are Uzbeks, in Kyrgyzstan, the majority are Kyrgyz people. But for centuries and even for 1,000 years, this territory, it was united into states and empires, not paying any attention to the ethnicity or to religion or to some other aspects. Often the division was geographical. It was defined by rivers, mountains, or deserts. These features, they served as a natural border. So, for example, a huge army could vanish in the desert and no one could catch or find them. Or you could sit safely behind the high mountains and not to be afraid that the enemy can attack you unexpectedly. Central Asia is a vast area with really diverse environmental conditions, and the most defining are rivers, mountains and deserts. So first of all, mountains. The region is surrounded by several mountain systems. So to the south we have Hindu Kush, which goes towards India. Then to the east we have Tien Shan, it's between Uzbekistan and China. And also to the north we have Altai and Ural mountains. Plus, in the western part we have the mountains of Kopetdag, but Kopetdag mountains in comparison to Hindu Kush or Tien Shan, with its peak about 7,000 meters, so it's relatively really modest. Today, mountains don't restrict the movement between the regions, but previously, especially in the winter, a lot of mountain passes were just impassable and some zones became isolated during the winter. For example, when Tamerlane, the great local hero, was considering to make Shahrizab's his capital, he changed his idea as mountains. They isolated the city from political and trading routes for several months a year. Central Asia has massive deserts like Karakum and Kyzylkum, and they both altogether make around 600,000 square kilometers, so they're bigger than, for example, Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan. Kum, as a part of the name, means sand in Turkic language, so whenever you hear this part Kum, you can understand that it talks about the desert or about the sands. For example, now on the modern maps you can see such thing as Aral Kum. So Aral Kum is the part which used to be Aral Sea once, some years ago. Plus, don't forget about Taklamakan desert, which is located in Xinjiang in China with its 337,000 square kilometers. And historically it was famous as the Sea of Death because it was one of the most challenging parts of the Great Silk Road. And plus, we also have the vast steppe zones in Kazakhstan, which goes, actually these great steppes, they go from Carpathians to Mongolia. In this landscape, we always had a very extreme climate, which we call sharp continental climate, which means that the temperatures can change from minus 50 in the winter till plus 50 in the summer. So yes, the difference can be around 100 degrees. The main rivers of Central Asia are Amu Darya and Syr Darya, and these rivers together with their tributaries, they irrigate the big territories, which makes the agriculture here possible, because without irrigation here in our region you cannot grow anything. And also the big cities like, for example, Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, they all appeared in the oases which were formed by these big rivers. Of course, you probably heard about Amu Darya, maybe not under this name, but as Oxus. Oxus, it's a Greek name which was given to it by the soldiers of Alexander the Great. It's not the longest river of this region, it's only about 1,400 kilometers long, but it's the most water abundant. It has really lots of water. For thousands of years, it has been a lifeline for people who live in this region. But at the same time, Amu Darya was famous under the name of Jayhun. It's Arabian name, and Jayhun, it means wild. Why it was called wild? Because very often it was changing its riverbed, it was changing its course, sometimes shifting for tens of kilometers. It was destroying fields and cities in the process, and very often it was a big problem for people who lived in this region. For example, the ancient Khwarezm civilization, which lived and was formed on the banks of the river of Amu Darya. When the river shifted to the south, the cities were abandoned and their civilization died. That's how the rivers were not only crucial for the irrigation, but sometimes they were creating really big problems for people who were living along that rivers. Don't forget about the lakes of the region, Aral, Caspian and Issyk-Kul. So the role of these bodies of water is very important in the forming of the rainfalls. For example, also during the wars, these lakes, they were used as a natural barriers, so the armies or also the traders, they had to go around them, they couldn't cross them. Also, the lakes, they supported the fishing communities, and that was one of the main income for people who lived next to the lakes. Water sources has always played a crucial role in the shaping of early societies, and cities like Nisa, Bactra, Merv, Samarkand and Bukhara grew in the oases which were formed by the water sources. And that's why the controlling of water meant everything, and conflicts about water, they were very normal, and at that days and even nowadays early civilizations like Bactria, Khwarezm, Sogdiana, they also were formed along the rivers, but about these early states we will talk in our next lecture. Geography influenced a lot on the political and economical life of Central Asia. So the mountains and deserts, they functioned as natural barriers which were separating the states and communities. For example, the Hindu Kush and Tien Shan, they separated China and India from Central Asia. On one hand, it limited the contacts between the states, between people. On the other hand, this kind of isolation, it really helped to develop the local unique cultures and economy. Take Bactria as an example. So this ancient state, which was located on the territories of the modern southern Uzbekistan and also Afghanistan, was isolated from Persia and from China, so from two regions. It developed a unique culture which was blending Greek, Persian and local traditions, and now we call that culture the local Hellenism. And plus, if we talk about China, it was always separated from the territory of Central Asia, and even though the culture of China was always very powerful, but it had very, very limited impact here. Kyzylkum and Karakum deserts also limited the movement, not only of traders, but also of the big armies. That made it hard for any power to dominate in the region for a very long period of time. Like, for example, Arabs or Genghis Khan, yes, they conquered these territories, but sometimes these big armies, they had either to leave, like Arabs did, or to assimilate, as Mongols did. But still, the arrival changed a lot and brought a lot of new things. Like, for example, Arabs, they brought Islam with them, which was accepted by the biggest part of the population of Central Asia, and still around 90% of local people, they are Muslim people. For millennia, the history of Central Asia was shaped by rivalry, cooperation and exchange between settled and nomadic people. So nomadic people, especially Turkic people, they relied a lot on their livestock, like sheep, like horse, like camels. And usually nomadic people, they move from pastures to pastures depending on the season of the year. And settled people, they lived in the cities and they lived on agriculture, farming and trade. Don't think nomadic people and settled people lived in the isolation from each other. No, of course, it's not true. There was a constant exchange between them. So nomads, for example, they were bringing meat and horses. The settled people, they were bringing the products of artisan, like ceramic, for example, or fabrics. Plus, it was grain, yes, so some food supplies. Nomads, they were not just raiders or barbarians. On the contrary, a lot of nomadic societies, they were on the level of the states, because they had the writing system, they had the centralized government and even monetary economies. The best example of that are Scythians, who were not only very organized, but they were very innovative. For example, they were among the first ones who started to use the saddles for horses in the 5th, 4th century BC. But the mobile lifestyle of nomad people, it was caring for sedentary people, so that's why very often nomadic people were depicted very negatively. And don't forget that the sources, which we have historical sources, they mostly belong to settled people, and of course the raids from nomadic people, they happen sometimes, and that's how in these sources nomads almost always depicted from their bedside. Life in the oases wasn't paradise either. Yes, of course, in many aspects it was much easier than the life of nomadic people, but settled people also had their challenges and problems, like they constantly had to clean their water canals, or riverbeds could shift, as you already know, or entire cities could be abandoned. And of course, the cities could be attacked by the enemies, and settled people, they couldn't just flee to another place as nomads could do, because they were tied to their land. If they did flee, they were losing everything. Despite all the hardships, Central Asia was a very developed zone. It was rich in cities, in agriculture and trade. And trade, of course, it was crucial for any place, not just for Central Asia, because it was exchange not only of goods, but also of the ideas, of the technologies. And Central Asia, it was located on the crossroads of many trading routes, of many exchanging passes. And of course, all people, first of all, they think about the Great Silk Road, which which was founded in the 2nd century BC, when the Chinese envoy Tien Shan, he came to Central Asia. He came to the territory of Fergana Valley, and this trading route, which actually was a system of trading routes, it functioned till the 16th century, when the sea trading became much more convenient and profitable for the traders. But the trading routes that connected Central Asia, for example, to India and to Persia, they existed long before the Great Silk Road appeared. Scholars think they started to form like 5,000 years ago, so in the 3rd millennia BC. And we know some of that routes, for example, the lapis lazuli, which was coming from the territories of Pamir, which is modern Tajikistan. This lapis lazuli was going to Mesopotamia and India. Or, for example, the jade route that carried jade from Kunlun Mountains in China to Central Asia and to India. But the trade was never easy, as crossing the mountains and deserts, it was dangerous. There was no highways like today. The caravans, they constantly had to face the shortage of water and food, sandstorms, the bandits who not only robbed the people, but also imprisoned them and sold them as slaves. For some nomads, the robbing caravans and enslaving the people was the main occupation, the main business. But still, the trading was a vital occupation. It was crucial for economy and for the life of the states. That's how all the rulers, they tried to make these trading routes as safe as possible. But the Great Silk Road, it wasn't a constant stream. It went and came depending on the political and military situation in the state. The caravans didn't just carry the goods, they also transported scholars, scientists, architects, poets and others. They also carried with themselves, apart from goods, ideas, religion, science and art. This is how, for example, Buddhism came from India to Central Asia and then further to China. This is how carrots, grapes and onions came from Central Asia to China, and from China were always coming technologies like gunpowder and paper. So Central Asia, it was always and still is a melting pot where cultures from East and West, they blend in one place. In conclusion, the geography of Central Asia always was a powerful force that shaped its history and culture. From the vast deserts and steppes to the towering mountain regions, the unusual geography of Central Asia always played a crucial role in the rise of nomadic empires, into development of agriculture, and also in the establishment of trading routes that lasted for the thousands of years. In its challenges and opportunities that were created by this unusual geography, it still impacts a lot on its life, from its geopolitical role to the cultural diversity. If you found this lecture interesting, please like, subscribe, follow and share this content with your friends and with your relatives, and see you at the next lecture.